Hello, I'm Philip Carter, the author of Who Built the Humans, which I'm sure you know already if you've listened to this before. And today I'm going to be reading you a free story from Who Built the Humans. I've abducted it from Who Built the Humans and I'm now broadcasting it directly into your brain. This is From the Stars A Million Voices, and it's one of 9 stories in the Furukawa universe where a physics professor and his student go on a magical adventure through time and space and discover that reality may or may not be a simulation. It depends on how you read it. They have an argument about it in the end. There's also a few relationships breaking down, children going missing, a little bit of murder, some reincarnation. It's all in all quite fun, wholesome family entertainment. It's like the X Files, but darker. So now I've introduced it, I'd like to remind you that, yeah, it's free. I've taken it from Who Built the Humans. So if you do like the story I'm about to read you, and you really want to know what happens next, you're going to have to buy the book. That's the whole point of this. Just thought I'd tell you from the beginning. So yeah, I'm going to get into it now because this introduction has now taken 1 minute and 23 seconds. This is the first story from the Furukawa universe. There are 8 more stories in this universe, with the largest breaking the 10,000 word mark. This universe contains time travel conspiracies, alien abductions, and explores the relationships between distant people across time. This universe also has subtle links to some of the other 10 universes in Who Built the Humans, meaning it is part of a much larger narrative. The ebook is now 50% off, with bonus stories added for a limited time. From the Stars, A Million Voices. Private William Bynes stood in a doorway to the grey-green office. At the back of the room sat Clyde Waller, still not looking up from his paperwork, still playing the part of the disinterested superior. He was a chubby man, wedged between a wall and his campaign desk, his fingers constantly tapping on something or swiping the mahogany surface for dust. He looked up at the slim silhouette in the doorway and nearly smiled before changing his mind, gesturing for William to take a seat. "Sir," William said, sitting down. He heard the door close behind him, the 2 security guards walking away across cold concrete to the edges of the corridor outside. William waited for a moment before leaning in. "Is everything okay?" he continued. This wasn't like their usual meetings. Clyde had usually let his guard down by now, usually smiled, but he was just sitting there. "It's about the event near your father's home," Clyde announced. "The Swamp Henge incident. You've been reading the papers?" "The Japanese plane, yes, sir," William said. Clyde leaned back on his chair, finally breaking character. "That's the official story," he said. "Then what's the real story?" William asked. Clyde moved about uneasily in his chair, adjusting his position as if bracing for an impact. "It's about your sister." William felt his heart stop. His mind was filled with images, the faces of people who apologized and said they'd stopped looking, people who left flowers but never helped comb the desert. William had stored all the faces of all the people who had ever let him down. Though he was never sure what he would do with them, he remembered them whenever the rage kept him up at night. "I should have believed you," Clyde said. His voice was low and hushed. William was still reliving it inside his mind, still ignoring the growing collection of empty whiskey bottles by his father's chair, still helping the old man patch up his hands after he went mad and started making holes in the desert. William remembered the explosion, the hasty cover-up. It was after Betty went missing, but he always felt the two were connected. "You found her?" he finally asked. "No." "So why am I here?" "Thing that crashed. It wasn't Japanese," Clyde said. "Then what was it?" William leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse of the paperwork on Clyde's desk. "We don't know," Clyde said. He turned the paperwork so William could see it and cracked his knuckles. "It says here, 4 minutes, 16 seconds of broadcast, but not where from," William said. Clyde looked down at the papers. from above. The thing crashed and all nearby radios received 4 minutes 16 seconds of nonsense on all channels. We tried to pinpoint the source, but all our instruments pointed skyward. In the days since, we've brought linguists on board. They keep identifying speech patterns, but nothing we can trace as being of this earth, Clyde admitted. He sounded worried, as if someone was listening in. For a moment, William wondered why, cycling through the possibilities in his head. Am I supposed to have this information, sir? William asked. He saw an unfamiliar fear in Clyde's eyes. His face was dark and serious, half eclipsed by the headlight beam of his lamp. William searched Clyde's features for a sign of something, then said, Wait, are you trying to tell me that Betty was abducted by aliens? Clyde leaned back on his chair. You have no idea what would happen to us if we leaked this sort of information, he replied. He placed a large hand over William's, running the tips of his fingers over William's knuckles. It's aliens, isn't it? My sister was right, William asked. There was a body at the crash site, but initial analysis suggests it died long before the crash, Clyde said. Betty? Alien, Clyde corrected. The word filled the room. Suddenly William was back in his sister's bedroom again, staring at crayon drawings of strange rooms and people, crying into the night as his father drunkenly clawed at the desert floor. Clyde opened the drawer in his desk and pressed the tip of a pen into one dark corner. He twisted it, listened for the click, and lifted the whole drawer out in one swift motion. Reaching into the cavity where the drawer had been, he pulled out a slim envelope and opened it, giving a single sheet of photograph paper to William. It looks just like her drawings, William said quietly. Something killed the pilot and crashed the ship on purpose, and whatever it was went missing from the wreckage. There were tracks, but they stopped at the road to Swamp Henge. Whatever it was had 6 legs, Clyde said. You think it went to Swamp Henge? A car was spotted on the road. The theory is it killed someone and drove away, but the car was never found. My own theory is that the thing is killing people to eat. What if humans aren't the only thing the aliens take up there? Clyde pondered. He passed William another photograph. William looked closely at the deep claw marks in the grey alien's body, but his focus kept returning to its eyes, 2 bulging obsidian orbs. Something in them made him sick, as if the creature was still alive on some level, as if it knew in death that he was staring down upon it, as if the photograph could see him back. He found his hands were cold and shaking, and he put the photograph down in fear. So you're telling me they abduct people, William said. He covered the photograph with one hand. It's not my department, but it's usually adults, Clyde replied. I see, William said. There was an uncomfortable silence in the room. William's mind travelled back to Betty. Preliminary reports suggest the 6-legged thing tore its way out of the wreckage, Clyde added. William leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow, asking, And you haven't sent anyone out to stop it? My superiors have. People from an outside agency. Cover up men, William said, his voice low and angry. It's not like that. They considered using soldiers here, saying there's a serial killer, but realised sending the army out into Swamp Henge would attract far too much attention. If we're catching this thing, we're going to have to sneak up on it, Clyde said. William shook his head in frustration. Leaning back on his chair, he picked up the picture again. From what I can see in this photo and what you've told me, you're chasing a giant crab. How hard can it be to find? We've dealt with shapeshifters before, Clyde said plainly. This might be the same. Jesus Christ, what else don't I know? William asked, the photograph shaking in his hands. Clyde moved to put a reassuring hand on his again, but William flinched and moved away. I think what we're looking at is the edge of something immense, something unimaginable. I think this is something not even the cover-up men are aware of, something entirely new, Clyde said. William stared into his eyes for a moment, trying to decipher what his superior wasn't telling him. He thought again about his father, about how he would spend nights in motels rather than in the house, as if that would stop the nightmares. So that thing my father said he saw under his farm before he lost his mind, was that the same type of vehicle? William asked. An old one. We think it's been down here for 10,000 years, Clyde answered. He handed William a handful of documents, watching him shake his head in disbelief as he skimmed over them. The craft had been covered up at first, then excavated from underneath and mapped out, with detailed notes explaining theories on what each chamber was thought to be used for. The official story was that a testing facility had been built underground and that some piece of military technology had exploded under the far corner of the Bynes family farm. William didn't believe the story at first, but he trained himself to accept it. Even when the cover-up men came and told him his father was delusional, that missing Betty had drove him mad, William tried desperately to believe it, to throw away what his father had said. It was as if meeting the cover-up men had altered his perception of reality, replaced the world he once knew with their own, and now their implanted world was falling away before him. The photograph in his hands was like sunlight shining into a deep and dark cave, proof that something else was out there, something tangible, another reality. Again, he looked at the blueprints, comparing them to the memory of Betty's drawings. They were structures he remembered. William caught himself saying with relief, this was at least some closure. His sister had told the truth. But the moment didn't last. The truth alone would not bring her back. This is alien technology, William asked, as if to reassure himself. Well, it sure isn't Japanese, Clyde joked, a poorly timed attempt to diffuse the tension. Briefly, William looked up at Clyde, wondered how long he had kept these notes in his desk. The older man looked tense, as if he could sense the building contempt behind William's neutral features. The signal from the sky. It was as if the stars themselves were screaming, Clyde said, interrupting the uneasy silence. Tell me the truth. Did they translate any of it? Anything at all? William asked. No, but we suspect whatever is up there was looking for the craft. I see. I have asked to give you a promotion. See if you can be part of the recovery crew that is stationed at the crash site. I feel it may be cathartic for you, if you don't mind me saying, to be close to the things that have done so much harm to your family, Clyde said. He waited for a response, watched William straighten the papers and put them back in the drawer atop the desk. Thank you, William said suddenly, standing up. Where are you going? Clyde asked. He stood up too, the chair creaking as he struggled around his side of the desk. I need some time to myself. I'll see you soon, sir, William said. He breathed in sharply and put his hand on a door handle. Please, call me by my name, Clyde said. William looked down and counted all the times he had asked for more information about Betty's case, only to be ignored or distracted. His eyes met with Clyde's, and he waited for a moment before asking, How long have you known they have abducted people? Come on. We all know. You know, I know. We're just not allowed to talk about it, Clyde said. Oh, I get it. We couldn't talk because of my position. But I can talk to you now. Generous old Clyde Waller has given me a promotion. Is that how it works? Exactly how far up the ladder do I have to climb before they tell me where Betty went? If I knew, I would have told you, Clyde said. And yet you knew this. Tell me, am I anything more than your subordinate? Did I not mean a single thing to you? William demanded. Clyde looked at him, a pathetic expression painted across his face. William looked back in disgust. Of course you mean something, Bill. Please, sit back down. We can talk about this, Clyde pleaded. William stayed still. You could have told me they took people. Then I could have told my dad to stop digging those fucking holes. Told Betty he was up there. Told him Betty was up there instead of down here, William hissed. As angry as he was careful to avoid alerting the guards outside by being too loud. My hands were tied, Clyde said. William leaned over his superior officer and snarled. I get it. Exactly how many more promotions do I need before you show me some respect? Clyde seemed very small inside his office now, a useless and cowardly creature shrinking away, retreating to its burrow. You know it's not like that, Bill. It's complicated, Clyde said. It always was, William replied. He turned to walk out of the room, but Clyde grabbed his wrist. Wait, Clyde said. The stars changed in those 4 minutes after the crash. They changed. This is so much bigger than you know, than I know. I shouldn't even be telling you about the sky, but you know what? Fuck the clearance. You're right. I should have told you everything. No. You missed your chance, William said, pulling his arm free. He walked out of the room, closing the door. The moon changed, Clyde said suddenly, putting his foot in the doorway. William stopped for a second, turning back and grimacing. I don't care if the fucking planet swapped places, sir. He looked through the gap in the door at his superior officer, thought about saying something but didn't. On either end of the corridor the guards were waiting, each silently assessing the situation. William could feel the tension, a fight waiting to happen. As he stood there, he realised that they had more than enough reasons to intervene, but that Clyde outranked them, and they had likely grown used to keeping his secrets. In that moment, William realised his true utility, how replaceable he was. He wondered how many others Clyde had brought down here. His fists tightened, his throat tense, with a barely contained rage. Please, don't call me sir. Call me by my name. You know me, Bill. I love you, Clyde whimpered. William stepped away from the door, his fists still clenched, wondering if it was worth punching him, if the guards would do anything, if he should hit them too. My name is William. Use it properly, he said through gritted teeth. He moved to turn away again, but Clyde was determined not to let him go. Look, if I could go back in time and tell you everything as soon as I found out, I would, Clyde said. You can't go back in time, sir, William said, as calmly as possible. He turned and walked quickly down the grey concrete corridor, brushing hurriedly past one of the guards and turning up the stairs, leaving Clyde alone, staring out at the concrete walls of the corridor and shaking, his heart punching around his chest as if it wanted desperately to escape him. And that is the end of From the Stars, A Million Voices. And that's probably one of my favourite stories in Who Built the Humans, which is, admittedly why it's one of the free ones. I actually was apprehensive about putting it up. It's the first of a series of 9 stories in one universe. The whole book contains 47 stories, 47 chapters, which build up to 11 universes, which are interconnected and build up to one whole fragmented novel. There's also a 48th story that sort of goes around and over and weaves through some of the other stories. So if you read it from front to back, you get a sense of that 48th story as there's a traveller who slips between dimensions. But if you get particularly sucked into this universe, you see at the end of this story, it would say you can, if you want to continue this universe, you can turn to this page. And on the ebook, you just click, and instead of going to the next page, you end up going to the next chapter of that particular universe. So in that way, it's 11 novellas which sort of congeal together. Some of them are quite short, some of them are quite long. I think the Furukawa universe, where this one comes from, is the longest one. I think it takes up actually about half of the word count, whereas some of the other stories and universes are only a few thousand words long. So yeah, really, actually, this is a really good one to introduce the book with because it does take up so much of the book. So that was a free demo of From the Stars, A Million Voices from Who Built the Humans. It is story number 4, I think, of the book. I'll have a look. It might be the 3rd story in the book. I've no. Yeah, it is. It's the 4th story in the book. And it's one of my favourites. I really like it. I really like, Bill and Clyde's relationship. And I like seeing, the personal effects of these huge cosmic revelations that, Perhaps time travel is possible. Perhaps aliens do exist. Perhaps children do get abducted by aliens. Do we know why? No. Let's go and find out. Um, and seeing the personal reactions to that, I think, is, a lot of people complain that science fiction's missing that kind of thing, but I don't think it is. I think good science fiction contains more of it than any other type of fiction. It's just people get distracted by the sheer ridiculousness of the science sometimes. But anyway, I'm rambling and I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did enjoy this story, please tell me, because I'm desperate for the feedback. I don't have a normal job. This is my job. I don't have anybody patting me on the shoulder, patting me on the back, buying me nice things. It doesn't happen. So I need you to give me compliments in the comments if you can. Yeah, that's about it. If you want to read the rest of that particular universe, you're going to have to buy the book. The ebook now, I think, is about £2.50, which is pretty decent. Paperback, I think, is crawling back towards £12. Don't quote me on that. It started off at 15 and it's moving downward. It's a beast of a book, though. It's huge. It'll keep you occupied for many evenings. And now you've heard my voice, you get to read it all in my voice, including the funny bits. So that's especially enjoyable. I hope you enjoyed that reading of the story that I just read. I keep calling it From the Stars a Million Screams, but that's because the last story in that universe is called From the Earth a Single Scream. So it's like sort of poetic, the bookend stories where it concludes. It's set a few days after and it concludes the entire story. So I often mix the titles up. Anyway, if you did enjoy it, please do comment. And you can also read the thing on Wattpad. I'm Paisley Print Author on Wattpad, or you can access that through www.whobuiltthehumans.com.